The emergency sirens echoed through the crystalline halls of the Galactic Council Station as representatives from 12 species gathered in the Great Chamber. The threat was unlike anything they had faced in 4 centuries of peace. The Devourer. Machines had consumed 17 star systems in just 6 months, turning planets into more of their kind with terrifying efficiency. Thane adjusted his ceremonial armor as he reviewed the tactical displays floating before him. The Valorian military commander had fought in 3 major conflicts during his long career, but nothing compared to this mechanical plague spreading across the outer rim. His scaled fingers traced the holographic star map, counting the systems that had gone dark one by one dot around the circular chamber. Other species representatives whispered among themselves in various languages. The tall, ethereal Nexari communicated through cascading light patterns that danced across their translucent bodies. The massive Kithra delegates floated in specialized atmospheric pods, their gas giant physiology requiring pressurized environments. Each species had contributed their finest warships and most experienced crews to the hegemony fleet. Then there were the humans. Admiral Stone sat quietly in the designated Earth section, his simple blue uniform-looking plane compared to the elaborate dress of other species. His delegation consisted of only 3 people, a laughably small representation for what should be a major military contributor. The other council members had heard stories about these newcomers from the 3rd Spiral Arm. They used crude metal ships powered by primitive fusion reactors and still relied on kinetic weapons that most civilizations had abandoned millennia ago. The main tactical display activated, showing the projected path of the Devourer swarm. Intelligence suggested the machines would strike at the industrial world of Gamma Tertius within 72 hours. The planet housed over 2 billion civilians and contained the largest shipyards in the sector. If it fell, the enemy would gain enough raw materials to double their numbers. Thane stood and addressed the assembly. His voice carried easily through the chamber's acoustics as he outlined the battle plan. The Valorian Third Fleet would form the main battle line with their plasma cannon cruisers. The Nexari would provide support with their phase shift technology, allowing ships to appear and disappear throughout enemy formations. The Kithara gravity manipulators would create space-time distortions to trap large groups of Devourer units. And what of the human contribution? Asked Delegate Nira, her crystalline form shimmering with curiosity. Thane glanced at his tactical notes. The humans had offered their colonial defense fleet, a collection of perhaps 50 ships that looked like they belonged in a museum rather than a modern battle. The Earth forces will provide rear guard protection and maintain our supply lines. Their vessels are adequate for such duties. Admiral Stone nodded politely but said nothing. He had been expecting this assignment. The other species viewed humanity as the little brother who insisted on helping despite lacking the tools for the job. What they didn't understand was that humans had been fighting wars since before they discovered fire, and every lesson learned in blood had been passed down through generations. The tactical briefing continued for several more hours as fleet commanders coordinated their forces. The hegemony fleet represented the combined military might of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Over 3,000 warships equipped with the finest technology available. Energy weapons that could crack continents, defensive shields that bent reality itself, and faster-than-light drives that allowed instantaneous tactical repositioning. Meanwhile, Admiral Stone remained connected to Earth Command through a quantum entanglement communicator hidden in his uniform collar. The messages were brief and coded, but their meaning was clear. The home system had been monitoring the Devourer threat for months through long-range sensors and deep space reconnaissance ships. Earth's military analysts had already identified 17 critical weaknesses in the enemy's tactical doctrine and developed countermeasures for each one. The meeting concluded with final deployment orders. Each species would contribute according to their strengths. The Valorians would lead the assault with their superior firepower. The Nexari would provide tactical flexibility with their ability to phase through solid matter. The Kithara would control the battlefield with their gravity manipulation technology, and the humans would stay safely in the rear, protecting supply convoys and evacuation ships. As the delegates dispersed to their respective fleets, Admiral Stone activated a secure channel to the human task force waiting at the edge of the system. Commander Blake appeared on the small display, her expression serious as always. Behind her, the bridge of the cruiser Defiant looked almost primitive, compared to the sleek alien designs. Exposed conduits, manual controls, and thick armor plating gave it the appearance of a factory rather than a starship. "Orders, Admiral," Blake asked. "Phase 1 deployment only," Stone replied quietly. "Colonial Defense Fleet to take positions as assigned. Weapons-free authorization pending enemy contact." Blake nodded understanding. The Colonial Defense Fleet represented less than 3% of Earth's total military capability, but even that small force carried weapons and tactics that would surprise their alien allies. Every human ship was built with one assumption, that it would face overwhelming odds and impossible situations. Their designers didn't create vessels expecting to win through technological superiority. They built them to survive what should be fatal damage and keep fighting until the enemy was dead or they were. The quantum communicator crackled with another brief message from Earth Command. The real military was watching and waiting, ready to deploy if the Devourers proved more dangerous than anticipated. The Terran Home Guard remained at high alert, while the Deep Space Patrol continued their eternal vigil at the edge of human space. Most importantly, the main battle fleet stayed hidden in the outer system shipyards, their massive forms invisible to alien sensors. For now, the galaxy would see only what humanity chose to show them. A small collection of outdated ships crewed by a species still learning their place among the stars. The other civilizations had no idea. They were about to witness what happened when humans decided something needed to die. The Devourer machines were about to learn why Earth's children never stopped preparing for war. Gamma Tertius hung like a blue jewel against the void, its 3 massive orbital shipyards gleaming in the light of twin suns. 2 billion people lived on the planet's surface, while another million worked in the zero-gravity construction facilities that produced civilian vessels for half the sector. Within hours, all of it would be converted into raw materials for the Devourer swarm. The enemy arrived exactly as predicted by Galactic Command intelligence. Hyperspace rifts tore open at the edge of the system, vomiting forth millions of mechanical entities that immediately began accelerating toward the industrial world. Each Devourer unit was roughly the size of a heavy cruiser, but moved with the coordination of a single organism. They had no crews to protect, no life support systems to maintain, and no concern for survival beyond completing their programming. Commander Blake watched the tactical display from the bridge of the Defiant as the hegemony fleet moved to intercept. The alien warships were magnificent in their deadly beauty. Valorian plasma cruisers glowed like miniature stars as their energy cores reached full power. Nexari phase ships flickered in and out of visible space, their translucent hulls catching and refracting light in impossible ways. The massive Kithra vessels looked like floating cities, their gravity manipulation systems already beginning to distort space around them. The first engagement began at maximum range as Valorian ships opened fire with their signature plasma cascades. Brilliant streams of contained stellar material lanced across the void, each shot carrying enough energy to vaporize a small moon. The Devourer swarm responded by splitting into smaller formations, using their superior numbers to overwhelm individual targets through concentrated fire. Blake could hear the tactical chatter between alien commanders as they coordinated their assault. The Nexari were phase-shifting through enemy formations, appearing inside Devourer clusters to deliver devastating close-range attacks before vanishing again. The Kithira had created gravity wells that trapped hundreds of enemy units, crushing them into dense metal spheres that exploded in showers of sparks and debris. For the first hour, the battle seemed to follow established patterns. The hegemony fleet had superior technology and experienced crews, while the Devourers relied on overwhelming numbers and mechanical precision. Alien losses were minimal, while thousands of enemy units were being destroyed every minute. Then the Devourers began adapting. the machines started coordinating their fire to overwhelm Nexari's shields, forcing the translucent ships to remain in normal space where they could be targeted. Gravity manipulation fields were countered by synchronized thrust patterns that prevented effective clustering. Plasma cascades that had been devastatingly effective began striking empty space as the enemy learned to predict firing solutions. Commander Blake's tactical officer looked up from his console with concern. The alien fleet is taking increased casualties. Devourer units are learning their attack patterns faster than expected. Through the view screen, Blake could see the truth of the report. A Valorian battleship exploded in a brief nova as concentrated. Enemy fire overwhelmed its shields. Nexari ships were being forced to remain visible longer, making them vulnerable to massed bombardment. Even the mighty Kithra vessels were struggling as the Devourers learned to disperse before gravity wells could form. The quantum communicator in Blake's collar crackled with an encrypted message from Admiral Stone aboard the command vessel. The human fleet had been holding position at the system's edge for over 2 hours, watching as their alien allies slowly gave ground to the mechanical tide. Earth's ships looked almost pathetic compared to the advanced technology being deployed around them. Crude metal hulls, visible weapon mounts, and primitive fusion drives marked them as products of a species still climbing toward true spacefaring capability. Stone's voice was calm despite the deteriorating tactical situation. All Colonial Defense Fleet vessels, this is Admiral Stone. The Galactic Council has formally requested our assistance. You are hereby authorized to engage enemy forces. Weapons free? Repeat, weapons free? Blake felt a familiar sensation as her ship's crew received their orders. Every human aboard the Defiant had trained for this moment since childhood. They were the children of a species that had never known true peace, descendants of warriors who had fought their way from cave to stars through endless conflicts with nature, each other, and now alien machines that wanted to consume everything they had built. All stations, battle stations, Blake announced over the ship's communication system. Engine room, I want maximum acceleration. Weapons, prepare kinetic bombardment systems. Navigation, plot intercept course with the nearest enemy concentration. The Colonial Defense Fleet began moving as one entity, their primitive-looking ships accelerating toward the battle at velocities that should have been impossible for vessels of their apparent design. What the alien allies didn't know was that human engineering had focused on different priorities. Where other species built ships expecting technological superiority to ensure victory, humans built them expecting to face impossible odds and survive through pure determination. As the human ships closed range, their weapon systems came online. Instead of elegant energy weapons or exotic physics manipulators, they deployed kinetic bombardment systems that fired simple metal projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The concept was ancient, dating back to the first human conflicts. But the application was devastating. The first salvo from the Colonial Defense Fleet struck the Devourer formation like the fist of an angry god. Metal slugs traveling at near-relativistic speeds didn't just penetrate enemy hulls. They passed completely through multiple targets while creating massive secondary explosions. Machines that had shrugged off plasma cascades and gravity manipulation were torn apart by the sheer kinetic energy of accelerated matter. Commander Blake's tactical officer stared at his displays in amazement. Direct hits on primary targets. Enemy formation disruption at 70%. They're trying to adapt, but kinetic projectiles don't give them time to analyze incoming threats. The tide of battle began to shift as human ships demonstrated capabilities that contradicted everything the galaxy thought it knew about Earth's military technology. Their heavy armor, which looked primitive and crude, proved nearly impervious to Devourer weapons. Their kinetic systems created cascading failures throughout enemy formations as destroyed units crashed into intact ones. Blake watched as the cruiser Tenacious, badly damaged and venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, performed a ramming attack against a Devourer command node the size of a small moon. The human ship's final transmission was simple and direct. For Earth and her children, The explosion could be seen across the entire system. The silence that followed the battle was more unsettling than the chaos that had preceded it. Gamma Tertius remained intact, its orbital shipyard scarred but functional, while debris from millions of Devour units drifted through space like a metallic snowstorm. The surviving enemy forces had retreated through emergency hyperspace rifts, their first tactical withdrawal since the campaign began 6 months earlier. Delegate Nera floated in her atmospheric pod aboard the Nexari flagship, her crystalline form flickering with patterns that indicated deep confusion. Her species had existed for over 50,000 years, ascending to spaceflight when most worlds were still cooling from their formation. They had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations, always maintaining their position as one of the galaxy's most advanced cultures through superior technology and elegant tactics. The humans had changed everything in less than 4 hours. Commander Thane stood in the war room of his flagship, studying tactical recordings that defied everything he understood about space combat. The primitive-looking human ships had demonstrated capabilities that should have been impossible, given their apparent technology level. Their crude metal hulls had absorbed damage that would have vaporized Valorian battleships. Their simple kinetic weapons had proven more effective against the Devourers than the most advanced energy systems in the galaxy. Replay Section 7 again. Thane ordered his tactical staff, the holographic display activated, showing the moment when the human cruiser Tenacious had performed its suicidal ramming attack. The ship was already critically damaged, with multiple hull breaches, venting atmosphere, and reactor containment failing. Any reasonable commander would have ordered evacuation and abandoned the vessel. Instead, the human crew had accelerated directly into the largest Devourer command node, their final transmission echoing across all frequencies. For Earth and her children, the impact had created a chain reaction that destroyed over 10,000 enemy units in a matter of seconds. The explosion was visible from the other side of the system, a brief star that outshone both of Gamma Tertius's suns. No crew had survived, but their sacrifice had eliminated nearly 15% of the Devourer force in a single moment. Thane had witnessed many acts of courage during his military career, but nothing approached the casual acceptance of death displayed by the human crews. They fought as if survival was secondary to mission completion, treating their own lives as just another resource to be expended when necessary. The quantum communicator in Admiral Stone's quarters activated with an encrypted signal from the Galactic Council. The combined leadership of 12 species wanted answers that Stone wasn't sure they were ready to hear. How had humanity achieved such devastating effectiveness with supposedly inferior technology? Why had their intelligence assessments been so completely wrong about Earth's military capabilities? Stone materialized as a hologram in the council chamber, his simple uniform contrasting sharply with the elaborate ceremonial dress of the alien delegates. He could see the confusion and fear in their various physiologies. These were beings accustomed to understanding their place in the galactic hierarchy, secure in their technological superiority and ancient wisdom. Admiral Stone, Delegate Nera began, her light patterns shifting to formal inquiry mode. The Council requires clarification regarding human military doctrine. Your vessels demonstrated capabilities far beyond our intelligence estimates. How do you explain this discrepancy? Stone considered his response carefully. The truth would be disturbing. To species that had known millennia of peace and prosperity, our ships are built according to human engineering principles. We design them for survival under adverse conditions. Thane leaned forward in his ceremonial armor. Adverse conditions. You mean combat against superior forces? We mean combat against any forces, Stone replied simply. Every human child learns basic tactics before they learn mathematics. Our species has been at war for over 3,000 years. Not continuous warfare, but we have never experienced what you would call true peace. There has always been another conflict on the horizon, another enemy that wanted to take what we had built. The implications of Stone's words settled over the council chamber like a cold wind. While other species had advanced their sciences, arts, and philosophy during millennia of stability, humanity had never stopped preparing for the next war. Their crude-looking ships were actually masterpieces of military engineering, designed by a species that considered conflict not an aberration but a natural state of existence. Delegate Kethros, speaking through his atmospheric pod's translation system, asked the question that terrified every council member. If this is true, then what we witnessed today represents your standard military capability. Stone's expression remained neutral, but there was something in his eyes that made the alien delegates uncomfortable. The Colonial Defense Fleet operates according to standard human military doctrine. Every ship is designed with the assumption that it will face overwhelming odds and impossible situations. We don't build vessels expecting technological superiority to guarantee victory. We build them to keep fighting until either the enemy is dead or we are. The tactical displays around the chamber showed recordings of human ships absorbing damage that should have been instantly fatal. Plasma cascades that could crack continents barely scored their armor plating. Gravity manipulation fields that crushed other vessels into metal spheres simply caused minor structural deformation. The humans had built their ships expecting to take punishment that would destroy anything else in the galaxy. Commander Blake appeared via hologram from the Defiant, her uniform showing scorch marks from battle damage. Council members, you asked how we achieved such effectiveness against the Devourers. The answer is simple. We've been fighting machines for centuries. Automated defense systems, industrial accidents that created hostile artificial intelligences, even our own computers that decided humans were inefficient. We know how machines think because we've been killing them since before we reached the stars. The revelation hit the assembled aliens like a physical blow. They had assumed the Devourers represented a unique threat because no organic species had experience fighting purely mechanical opponents. Humans had been battling artificial intelligences as a matter of routine for generations, developing tactics and weapons specifically designed to counter mechanical advantages. Thane reviewed the battle recordings again, this time understanding what he was seeing. Human ships didn't just fight the Devourers. They anticipated their adaptation patterns and countered them before they could be implemented. Kinetic weapons weren't chosen for their simplicity, but because machines had difficulty analyzing and countering projectiles that struck faster than their sensors could track. There is one more thing the Council should understand, Stone said quietly. The Colonial Defense Fleet that participated in today's battle represents approximately 3% of Earth's total military capability. We assigned them to this operation because they were the closest available force, not because they were our primary response option. The silence that followed this statement lasted for nearly a full minute as the implications sank in. The force that had single-handedly turned the tide against the galaxy's greatest threat in centuries was little more than a local police unit. By human standards, the galaxy would never underestimate Earth again. 3 weeks after the battle at Gamma Tartaphis, intelligence reports began flooding into the Galactic Council that painted a picture of humanity so far beyond their previous understanding that many delegates initially refused to believe the data. The investigation had started as a routine post-battle assessment of Allied capabilities, designed to better integrate human forces into future operations. What they discovered instead challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare itself. Director Voss of Galactic Intelligence stood before a holographic display that showed the Sol system in unprecedented detail. Her Nexari physiology allowed her to process multiple data streams simultaneously, but even her advanced cognitive abilities struggled to comprehend the scope of what human long-range sensors had revealed. Earth's star system wasn't just inhabited. It was completely militarized on a scale that defied comprehension. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had been converted into the largest weapons manufacturing complex in known space. Hundreds of facilities, each the size of a major city, worked around the clock producing everything from simple kinetic projectiles to exotic matter warheads. The sheer industrial capacity represented more military production than the rest of the galaxy combined. Mars itself had been transformed into a military academy and training facility where human officers Learn tactics in environments ranging from zero gravity to high radiation fields. The planet's surface was covered with training ranges that simulated every conceivable combat scenario, including several that exactly matched Devourer tactical patterns despite humanity's supposed lack of experience with mechanical opponents. Commander Reed of the destroyer Relentless had been assigned as a liaison officer to help explain human military doctrine to increasingly bewildered alien officials. His ship was representative of what humans considered a basic patrol vessel, yet it carried enough firepower to single-handedly destroy most alien battle groups. The casual way he discussed weapons systems that could crack moons made his alien counterparts deeply uncomfortable. "The thing you have to understand," Reed explained to a group of Valorian military analysts, "is that we build everything assuming we're going to be outnumbered and outgunned. Our smallest patrol ships carry enough ammunition for extended independent operations because we might not see resupply for months. Our crew quarters are designed to function as emergency combat stations. Even our mess halls have blast doors and emergency life support." The Valorian officers exchanged glances that conveyed their growing unease. Their own ships were marvels of engineering designed for maximum efficiency and crew comfort during routine operations. The idea of building vessels where every compartment was a potential battleground was alien to their thinking. The intelligence briefings continued for days as the true scope of human military organization became clear. The colonial defense fleet that had fought at Gamma Tertius was just one of dozens of specialized forces. The Terran Home Guard protected the inner system with ships that made the colonial vessels look like escort craft. The Deep Space Patrol maintained watch at the edge of human territory with vessels specifically designed for long-range reconnaissance and first contact with hostile forces. Most disturbing of all was the revelation that humanity maintained separate military commands for different types of conflicts. They had forces dedicated to fighting other organic species, machines, energy beings, and even theoretical opponents they had never encountered but considered statistically likely to exist. Each command structure operated independently with its own doctrine, weapons, and training programs. Delegate Nera reviewed classified reports in her private chambers, her crystalline form flickering with patterns that indicated severe distress. The intelligence files contained detailed analyses of human military capabilities that read like science fiction. Kinetic bombardment systems that could sterilize entire continents. Antimatter warheads stored in quantities that could power most civilizations for centuries. Defensive installations hidden throughout the Sol system that could engage fleets at ranges measured in light hours. The most chilling discovery was humanity's approach to casualties. While other species designed their military doctrine around minimizing losses and preserving experienced personnel, humans planned for wars where survival rates might drop below 10%. Their training programs prepared officers to command effectively even after losing most of their crews. Their ships were designed to continue fighting with skeleton crews or even complete automation if necessary. Captain Morris of the heavy cruiser Determination had been invited to address the Galactic Military Academy, the premier institution where officers from all 12 species learned advanced tactical theory. His presentation on human battle doctrine left the audience in stunned silence. "We operate under the assumption that every engagement is a last stand," Morris explained to the mixed group of alien cadets. "Not because we're pessimistic, but because history has taught us that preparation for the worst-case scenario gives you the tools to handle anything less severe. When you train expecting to face impossible odds with inadequate resources, normal combat situations become manageable." A young Kithera cadet raised a tentacle to ask a question. But surely such an approach would result in unnecessary casualties during routine operations. Morris considered the question seriously. In the short term, yes. Human military doctrine accepts higher casualty rates during training and preparation phases. But in actual combat, our survival rates are significantly higher than galactic averages because our personnel are prepared for conditions that would break crews from other species. We lose people in training, so we don't lose them in battles that matter. The philosophical implications were staggering. While other civilizations sought to eliminate risk and uncertainty from military operations, humans had embraced chaos as a fundamental aspect of warfare. They didn't try to control the unknown. They trained to thrive in it. Director Voss compiled her final report with hands that trembled, despite her species' reputation for emotional stability. The document would be classified at the highest levels and distributed only to the most senior leadership of each member species. Its conclusions would reshape galactic politics for centuries to come. Humanity represented a military force unlike anything in recorded history. They had achieved their devastating effectiveness not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but by never forgetting that survival was not guaranteed. Every human ship, soldier, and strategic doctrine was built around the simple recognition that the universe was fundamentally hostile and that victory required the willingness to pay any price necessary. The colonial defense fleet had been their equivalent of a local police force, and it had single-handedly turned the tide of the galaxy's greatest crisis in living memory. The implications of what humanity's actual military forces might be capable of were too frightening for most species to contemplate. The galaxy had thought it was welcoming a young species into the community of civilized worlds. Instead, they had unknowingly allied themselves with the most dangerous military power in known space. The long-range sensor array aboard the Galactic Council station detected them first, appearing at the edge of human space like ghosts materializing from the void. The initial readings were so far beyond established parameters that the automated systems flagged them as equipment malfunctions. It took 3 separate confirmation scans before the terrifying truth became clear. A fleet was approaching that made every previous display of human military might look like a training exercise. Sensor technician Kala stared at her displays with compound eyes that had evolved to process complex visual data, but nothing in her species' 40,000-year history of spaceflight had prepared her for what she was seeing. The contacts were massive beyond comprehension, each individual vessel registering energy signatures that exceeded entire battle groups from other species. More disturbing still, they moved in perfect formation despite their incredible size, maintaining spacing and coordination that suggested a level of tactical discipline that bordered on the supernatural. Commander Thane received the alert in his quarters aboard the Valorian flagship, where he had been reviewing intelligence reports about human military capabilities. The past 6 months had been a continuous series of revelations that had shattered his understanding of warfare, but this latest development threatened to break his sanity entirely. He activated the quantum communicator to Admiral Stone with hands that shook despite decades of military experience. "Admiral, our sensors are detecting a massive fleet emerging from the outer reaches of your territory. Please explain these readings before my government assumes this represents a hostile action." Stone's image appeared on the holographic display, his expression as calm as ever despite the panic spreading through alien command structures across the galaxy. Behind him, the bridge of his command ship looked exactly the same as it had 6 months earlier during the Devour crisis. The same functional design, the same primitive-looking controls, the same sense that humans built things to work rather than to impress. "The contacts you're detecting represent the Terran main battle fleet conducting routine patrol exercises," Stone replied matter-of-factly. "We rotate them through the outer systems every few years to keep the crews sharp and maintain operational readiness." The casual way he delivered this information made Thane's blood run cold. Routine patrol exercises. The force that had appeared on their sensors was larger than the combined military strength of all 12 Galactic Council species, and humanity considered it a training mission. Deep in the classified vaults of Galactic Intelligence, Director Voss was accessing files that required authorization from 3 separate species councils. The documents contained theoretical analyses of what human military forces might look like if the colonial defense fleet truly represented only 3% of their total capability. The projections had been dismissed as statistical impossibilities by most analysts, but the sensor readings from the approaching fleet matched the theoretical numbers almost perfectly. The main battle fleet consisted of vessels that defied easy classification, The smallest ships were the size of space stations, their hulls black as the void itself and bristling with weapon systems that made the colonial defense. Fleet's armaments looked like children's toys. The largest vessels were so massive they generated their own gravitational fields, requiring specialized navigation protocols to avoid accidentally pulling smaller objects into their gravity wells. At the center of the formation traveled the flagship, a structure so enormous that it took several minutes for sensor beams to map its complete dimensions. The ship was larger than most moons, its surface covered with cities that housed not just crew quarters, but entire manufacturing complexes, training facilities, and what appeared to be complete ecosystems designed to support long-term deep space operations. Captain Morris received orders to serve as liaison between the main battle fleet and increasingly panicked alien governments. His heavy cruiser determination, which had seemed so formidable during intelligence briefings about human capabilities, looked like a shuttlecraft compared to the massive forms approaching from the outer system. The quantum communicator in his quarters crackled with desperate messages from military leaders across the galaxy, all asking the same question. What exactly was humanity preparing to fight? The answer came during a classified briefing that would haunt the nightmares of alien military commanders for generations. Fleet Admiral Carter materialized as a hologram in the Galactic Council chamber, her uniform bearing decorations that indicated service in conflicts most species had never heard. Behind her, the bridge of the flagship Indomitable stretched away in all directions, its scale so vast that crew members moved between stations using small vehicles. The main battle fleet exists to defend Earth itself against threats that require our full attention, Carter explained to the assembled delegates. The Colonial Defense Fleet handles routine peacekeeping and minor conflicts in our territory. The main battle fleet deploys only when the survival of humanity is at stake. Delegate Nira's crystalline form flickered with patterns that indicated barely controlled terror. What kind of threats could possibly require such overwhelming force? The Devourers represented the greatest danger the galaxy has faced in recorded history, and your colonial forces defeated them without significant losses. Carter's expression remained neutral, but there was something in her eyes that made the alien delegates deeply uncomfortable. The universe is a large place, and we've learned not to assume we're the most dangerous thing in it. Our deep space reconnaissance has identified several potential threats that make the Devourers look like a minor irritation. We maintain the main battle fleet because history has taught us that when something wants to destroy everything you've built, half measures are just a slower way to die. The implications were staggering. While the galaxy celebrated the defeat of the Devourer swarm as the triumph of civilization over mechanical chaos, humanity was preparing for enemies that would make those machines look primitive by comparison. They had never stopped planning for wars that other species couldn't even imagine, Commander. Thane requested access to human threat assessment databases, hoping to understand what kind of dangers could justify such overwhelming military preparation. The files he received contained analyses of theoretical opponents that read like horror stories. Machine intelligences that consumed entire galactic clusters. Energy beings that existed in dimensions beyond normal spacetime. Organic species that had evolved beyond individual consciousness into hive minds spanning multiple star systems. Most disturbing of all were the references to something called the Deep Dark, regions of space beyond the galactic rim where long-range sensors detected movements and energy signatures that defied classification. Human exploration vessels had been monitoring these areas for centuries. REPO are TNG contacts with entities so alien that first contact protocols had been abandoned in favor of immediate tactical withdrawal. The main battle fleet trains for scenarios where retreat is not an option and reinforcement is impossible, Admiral Stone explained during a final briefing to the Galactic Council. We operate under the assumption that if something makes it past our outer defenses and reaches the inner system, it represents an extinction-level threat to our species. Under those circumstances, conventional military doctrine becomes irrelevant. The alien delegates listened in stunned silence as Stone described weapons systems that could restructure matter at the subatomic level, defensive technologies that manipulated space-time itself, and tactical doctrines that planned for battles lasting centuries. The humans had built not just a military force, but a mechanism for species survival that could function even if Earth itself was destroyed. As the massive fleet disappeared back into the depths of space, resuming patrol patterns that spanned hundreds of light years, the Galactic Council faced a new reality. They had thought they understood the scope of human military power when the colonial defense fleet defeated the Devourers. They had been impressed by intelligence reports showing the true extent of Earth's industrial capacity and training programs. None of it had prepared them for the revelation that humanity's actual military forces operated on a scale that made galactic civilization itself look fragile and temporary. The species they had welcomed as junior partners in a community of civilized worlds were actually the guardians standing between that civilization and threats too terrible for most minds to comprehend. The universe suddenly felt much larger and more dangerous than it had before humanity showed them what real military preparedness looked like.